Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Hi, my name is Steve, and if this is the first time that you're tuning into Figure It Audi, welcome to you too. You're joining me now on episode 3 of the S4 Redemption series, which definitely started out as trying to figure out where all my horsepower and torque went last fall when I hit the dyno and numbers weren't looking so good. But since then, we've done what car people do and things have just devolved into modifying the car even more. Today's video, of course, is going to be about looking at and installing the new Jackal Motorsports air intake system that is very simple and very slick. I'm excited to see how it fits up, and I really want to hear a little bit of that induction noise, whoom, whoom, on the pedal blipping. And I really didn't do my due diligence going into Jackal's stage 1 last time. I have all the ability to get air out of the engine because I have catless downpipes, but I didn't take care of getting more air into the engine. And this is finally going to fix that. I'm going to call myself out on it first so you don't have to do it in the comments section. Yes, in previous episodes, I did state that I wanted to build a true cold air intake system where the filter was way down in the front bumper there, but I've decided against that for a whole number of reasons. One is a problem that I really never had a solution for, which is the car is super low, and yeah, I try to drive it only when it's nice out, but I had no way to deal with water entry of having a filter way down there. Another major one was simply price. I did not see this kit coming on the market, and the price point is really, really good for what you get. What I was planning on building was going to be way more expensive for all the materials to get all the things routed all the way down there, and of course, Canada factor too. And number 3 is heat management. I was not thinking about that at all. I was thinking about some gold tape potentially to hold off a little bit of the heat, but I was only thinking about where's the coldest access point for air that I can get and not how do I keep it cold on the way in. And that's really the strong point of this kit here. Now, the first real step is to simply remove your stock air box, and I trust that you are more than capable of doing that. But much like the last video on the SAI system, there's a little bit more than meets the eye to your stock air box, and there's an opportunity here to clean up some clutter in the engine bay. It's important that you're aware that there are 3 sources of fresh air for your stock air box. The first one is the obvious one, the big duct opening in the front here, feeding it into the top of the air box. And the second is actually one that I bet you didn't even realize was there. When you look down, there is a huge cutout in the back of the box that is always open. And there's actually a really big hole into your fender well there. And I'll show you in a second, there is a duct that is slipped in behind your fender well liner that's always pulling air from the opposite direction that the car's moving. There it is right there. It is pretty large and it stops at about 11 o'clock inside of the fender. The third and final source is this hole at the bottom here through a flap that is sometimes open, only in high RPM states. It's operated by vacuum and a little actuator that's on the inside of the box right here. And we pick up vacuum from the front, and this is where we can do some cleanup. I recommend you go back and watch the episode I did right here on the last S4 build series where it was all about the intake manifold and the flapper mod I did in there, because I also explained everything about the high RPM, aka short runner mode, versus the low RPM, long runner mode of the intake. And the whole point is around 5,000 RPM for the stock tune. It will change where that manifold flap is on the inside. It'll actually drop it down to make short runners. And at the exact same moment, because this line is tied into the exact same source of the actuator that works at flap, this line will actually cut vacuum to this flap and actually open it up to get as much air as possible coming into the engine. Typically, this line right here is tucked very nicely down under the intake manifold and pops out around the back. It's held into a couple of little clips over here, there's one right here, and feeds down into the box. But clearly, if we are removing the stock air box, we now cannot use that benefit of the third air source. So we can get rid of that and do a little bit of cleanup right here at the vacuum fitting. So right away, I'm actually just gonna pop off this line and put a vacuum cap on the outside port right there. Install time, and we're gonna work our way backwards from the throttle body, starting with something actually from 034 Motorsports. It is not included in the Jackal Motorsports air intake kit, but it's just a really nice supplementary item to get more airflow, and it looks pretty cool too. It is quite simply their big silicone air inlet into the throttle body. What's nice about it is that there are less tight radius bends, so you can kind of take a look at how tight these 2 corners are on the OEM piece, and it's smoothed out just a little bit. But potentially more important is the fact that the inner diameter is just really big and really consistent the whole way down. So if I were to hold these elbows together, the diameter at the very outside would in fact be the same. But what you can see in the OEM piece is that it actually necks down a little bit towards the inside. So you're going to get smoother, more airflow through this. And as a bonus, silicone doesn't retain heat quite as much, so this is just a good piece of material to have in the engine bay. If you're also doing this, just know that you have to transfer over this plastic 90-degree vacuum fitting that feeds the suction pump. and they are brittle. In fact, if you have the chance before this project, buy a couple, keep them in your toolbox. Inevitably, one will break on you. So just very carefully transfer that over. The elbow is on, just loose for now because we're not quite sure how we're gonna have to clock this yet until we put in the wall that's gonna go right here. And now it is time to make our MAF a little more expensive. And that is because we are going to put some gold heat wrap from DEI on here. They make them in a whole number of different widths and lengths. I've used the sheet before on the bottom side of the intake manifold that I did in the original S4 build series. And really the whole goal here is to reflect more heat. Gold wrap is a really good way to do that. And obviously the MAF is made out of plastic, and not that it retains a ton of heat compared to something like metal, but it's going to be the odd man out in basically a silicone MAF, silicone kind of order. So we should do whatever we can to reflect more heat. So I'm going to apply some of this on here. And in the meantime, this will be waiting for you in the description of this video for the link to Amazon. If nothing else, things are looking pretty slick in here, but this is going to do something. Keep in mind that the headers are right here. Heat is going to radiate and penetrate this area. So this is very much a functional thing to do. Now I'm not going to go straight into the coupler. This will go on the other side of the MAF, but what we need to do before we kind of clutter up this area is figure out if this wall is going to fit. Now I don't question whether it's going to fit on any normal car. It's just that I have a couple of things here that are probably going to be in the way. Namely, I'm worried about the thermostat and external oil cooler lines that I have running under the headlight and wrapping up around the reinforcement bar that runs kind of parallel with the engine right here. So what I need to do is, number one, make sure this hose can move far enough over, but I have, of course, the auxiliary radiator removed on this car and capped off this line right here. So what I'm actually going to do is take this fitting and rotate it downwards so that this nub is actually facing inwards, and I might actually clock this fitting a little bit more here too, to sort of just move everything this way. Yes, like I said, you do have to remove the aux rad for this, and I won't explain anything about that because Matt does a great job, so just check out his video right there. He tells you about why that's important because of radiating heat and space, and how to bypass it if you don't have the JHM kit like I do. As advertised, it is a very tight fit, but everything fits. And what's awesome is I did not have to change anything related to the thermostat and whatever's going on with my oil cooler. It does clear just because the wall comes up kind of close towards the headlight and the water lines here, but not so far that it interrupts anything going on sort of like under the headlight, which is what you would kind of expect, but I was just really not looking forward to moving that. So this is fantastic news. Now, you do need to negotiate a couple of things here, so I'm going to take all of this out now and show you what I had to change to make sure everything fits, especially in this area. Just as a bit of proof for people with my same oil cooler kit, you'll notice that there is exactly the right amount of room for the thermostat and then the width of the water coolant line directly on top of that, and then it butts up right under the ballast for the headlights. So it is possible, but like you're going to use every millimeter of space. Now, applicable to everyone else, I made a bunch of changes on the water assembly right here. Now, the fitting on the front is fixed, so you're not doing anything about that, but I loosened up every single hose clamp, and what I did in order was the very bottom one, and I rotated it about 20 degrees, meaning if this loop was facing down a little bit before, now it's up a little because it has to clear this sort of imaginary line right here where the heat wall is going to be. So everything got rotated up. And then, as I said earlier, I just moved this middle fitting so that the bypassed port is simply facing in towards the driver's side right now instead of out as it was before. And then because everything rotated under that, I also moved this fitting just a little bit too so it could meet back up to where the line has to be. I will admit that you will lose some coolant when you do that. I certainly did. I actually just siphoned it out the top once I got rid of that top connection there, and I just put it into a container that I'm just going to feed straight back into the expansion tank later. And you probably could just like muscle the hose without rotating anything, but I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to have no stress on that hose assembly, so I spent some extra time and moved it around a little bit. Maybe this one's optional for you. The other two very small changes I made was removing this plastic piece. This is just sort of a protectionary piece that sits along the rail right here to protect the plastic harness cover. And that is simply because the wall is going to bump into it and not sit right if this is in the way. And likewise, the conduit itself, typically it's kind of pulled a little further over like it is now, and you need to just push it towards the front of the car so the wall can sit in nice and snug there. I felt it was appropriate to sport my Jackal t-shirt to reveal the final fit and finish here. Look at that. And it's kind of funny, someone reached out on Instagram and said, I see you're going for the gold air intake. And true statement. I even put a little bit more gold tape on the aluminum fitting right here to make sure that everything that was all the way from the throttle body down to the filter and the wall itself was heat reflective in some manner. So this is looking really nice, and not that this is really coordinated in such a way, but the red filter does look really good with the red coil packs too. True to form, I did spend quite a bit of time just adjusting my band clamps and fittings just so. I really didn't find a perfect setup just because I think the 034 Motorsport elbow here isn't molded in the perfect way. I wish it was actually kind of tilted outwards a little bit, because ultimately it kind of makes the Jackal kit come in on quite a sharp angle, which totally does work because there's such a wide rubber grommet here that it's still really nice and tight, and kind of doesn't matter if you come in like me or, you know, a little bit more clocked this way. But ultimately it comes down at a bit of a 45 and runs almost into the back of the headlight. I think that's a little bit more of a B7 kind of thing, where the depth of the headlight is a little bit larger than the B6s, but ultimately everything fits. There is truly no gaps anywhere. I mean, the wall comes right to the front here. I'll just show you sort of where I landed the wall in the back. It's just to the right of the AC line right here. And when you close the hood, it does come down really nice and snug, so don't get thrown off by the fact that, you know, this little piece right here is sitting slightly above the weather stripping on the front, because everything does compress down, and it does compress into the hood liner a little bit too. Clearly, I do have the front of the car back together, and it gives me a really good opportunity to point out that, yes, there's going to be air moving through this opening here now that there isn't a duct kind of channeling it this way. It's going to be traveling into the engine bay. Yeah, there's probably going to be some turbulence, but ultimately there is a low pressure zone under the car just because of how it's designed. And hopefully the air kind of gets like sucked down towards the cats and down and out the back of the car. But that isn't super important. What is critical, in my opinion, is that we make sure that the air filter is still getting sufficient air. Now, back a video ago, I said I wanted to do a cold air intake, and I still intend to do that with an extra little modification on the way out here, because there will be air passing through the duct in your bumper right here. Even if you don't have the DTM bumper, there will be a little bit of a grill here bringing in air. And since you do not have your aux rad here, air is going to be kind of slamming into the back of your fender liner and just stuff here, unless you do something about that. One day I fully intend to learn how to weld and fabricate and maybe do some 3D scanning and printing. But for now, I have to do with whatever is available online. And I found a plastic duct on Amazon. It's actually a brake duct for channeling air towards brake rotors. But I think it's going to do the trick. I think it's a great size. And I'll put the link to this item in the description of the video. I'm going to find a way to securely fit it into the back of this duct so that it doesn't hit anything back there and it doesn't interfere with the bumper when that goes on. And see if I can't just channel some air up through a hole under the filter. Doing stuff like this is more of an art than a science. I ran into clearance issues on the bumper itself, the air duct that's already in there, an AC line in the back. But, you know, it's actually pretty subtle. If I didn't come up close with a big light, you wouldn't know anything's in here. It is capturing probably like 3/4 of the air that flows through, which is pretty nice. Of course, there are some big gaps on the sides and on the top. So I'm going to take it out, do some trimming on the left-hand side at the very least there before I start securing anything, but I definitely think it's going to work. Keep in mind, this is very much a prototype, meaning I expect to change it in the future. I would like to think so anyways. This is just a universal brake duct, some dryer hosing, and tape, honestly. But here is the artisan duct. So notched out a spot on the top. I'm telling you this just in case you buy the exact same part and use it in the same bumper. 45 at the bottom left to follow this line in the guide. Cut off the entire left-hand side, and you're left with sort of a gap that looks like that. You'll see me later fill up these spots with black Gorilla tape. It's not a big deal. I know that doesn't sound sexy, but I don't want to permanently change my OE air guide, and I don't want to destroy it, and I don't want to permanently fix this new duct into the air guide either. And it's race car stuff. You can look and see that air management is done all the time with black tape on race cars. I'm not saying I have a race car, just saying, doesn't have to be fancy. Here it is, prototype V1. This is all you're shooting for. It's not perfection. You really don't need to move the air that far either. And what it looks like in the car is this. And it's definitely one of those cases of good from afar, but far from good. It's taped in. It's black Gorilla tape. It's nothing fancy. Yeah, I'm gonna have to be careful if I ever wash the car in the front there and not spray too much water in. But it looks totally fine. And when the bumper's on, I know you're not gonna be able to see it at all. And the seal is like really good. I have no air coming in on the side. Bottom, just the top opening here because there's a part in the bumper that needs to slip through. I'm channeling all the air into here. By the way, the inlet size there is 3.5 inches. Obviously the duct itself is as well. And it pops up right there under the filter, just behind the headlight. It's going to be moving a ton of air. Keep in mind the car is moving forward, and because I've channeled all the air through that duct, that is a lot of air. while I just finish up and put the front of the car back together, put it on the ground, and we can close out this episode here together for a little drive so we can listen to the intake. Go check out the description of the video right now. I have the link to the Jackal website so you can check out the intake page yourself if you want to pick one up. Off we go, and it just feels good to be back on the road. Yeah. You know, the funny thing about driving a car that has a cluster in miles an hour is I've never really bothered to learn the middle equivalent of, 50 kilometers an hour and just stuff that doesn't convert off the top of the head. So I never actually know how fast I'm going. And it's always a little bit of a gamble to see if I'm going to get a ticket or not, but try to just go with the flow. I'm honestly hoping you can hear the symphony a little bit. I don't know how much induction noise you can hear through my little microphone right here from outside of the car, and I know things tend to get a little breezy when you have the windows open, but it does sound a little bit throatier. It's almost a little intangible. Don't install this intake expecting that you're going to hear massively different noises from inside of the car. Under wide open throttle, there's a little something though, for sure. And as you saw in the opening little credit there, it does definitely have a lot of induction noise on a solid throttle blip. Just a couple of revs in neutral in traffic, pretty low key. I'll drop it to third here. I'm at about 3,000 RPM and I'll mat it. Sounds pretty good. Ultimately for me, this is one of those mods where it's cheap, it's easy to do, it's probably good for the engine, and you know what, it just makes you feel good and it sounds good too. Let's practice a little springtime 1, 2, 3 here, shall we? I miss driving this. And you know what? That felt pretty healthy. I have my reservations that the results that we saw in the fall in the dyno are actually true. The car does feel really good. And while I'm talking about next episode, there's going to be more coming in terms of data logging. Next episode, we're going to check the timing system in terms of the cam adjuster. I'm going to look at some fuel trim settings. I'm going to make sure that my throttle adaptation is correct so that wide open throttle is in fact wide open. And we're going to see what else we can uncover in the computer that might hopefully close the book on whether anything technical is going on with the car beyond the stuff that we found in the previous episode. But I gotta say, she is feeling really good. As always, thanks for watching. Truly do appreciate it. I have a lot of fun making these videos, and when you guys chime in with comments and give me a thumbs up, it really does mean a lot. Huge shout out to Matt and Tony once again at Jackal Motorsports for making this episode possible, and I hope to see you guys next time.